Hello, welcome to the Craft House Magic Set of Tutorials. My name's Ellie and today I'm going to show you how I thread my ends in, or sew my ends in colourwork knitting. So this is the Peerie Flooers hat by Davies. I'll pop a link below if you need to find the pattern. And I've actually completed the knitting part and I've sewn most of the ends in, but I left two so that I can show you what I do when I sew my ends in. So you will need a nice small metal darning needle like this one. You want it to be able to go through the plies of the yarn because that's how I make sure I've secured my yarn properly. You'll know what I mean in a minute, and you'll also need a sharp pair of scissors. So thread your yarn onto your needle and then I just give the yarn a little bit of a tug to make sure that the work is nice and neat on the right side of the work, because you don't want a sort of baggy end that doesn't make the tension the same as all the other stitches on the right side of the work. So my yarn is coming from this direction, so what I'm going to do is to try and work the yarn into the back of the stitches this way. So as per usual, I'm going to try and mimic the way the stitches are produced. So I will go in through this stitch, there, and back up and into the same stitch. So you're duplicate stitching at the back of the work. However, you get to the point where you get quite a lot of floats on the back of the work, so I then just try and do my best to split the yarn here. So I'm halfway through that piece of yarn, if you can see, there, and then I'm going to just be sort of working across the work just so that I'm splitting the yarn, or if there are full stitches like there is one here, I'm just going to go in and split a couple of layers. You don't have to just do two, you could go up and down a little bit more. It doesn't really matter as long as you make sure that you are not going to the right side of the work and keeping it quite tight so it looks relatively neat. And if you look on the right side, you can't see the thread that I've been weaving in there. So I like to make sure that it's absolutely super secure, so I go through quite a few different little areas. It's difficult to duplicate stitch, so I'm basically just sewing into the plies of the yarn. You can see better when you've got it right in front of you rather than seeing on my screen. So there we go. I think that's plenty of weaving in to keep that nice and secure. If you're using 100% non-superwash yarn, it tends to be more sticky anyway, so there's no chance of that coming undone. So I'm going to unthread my yarn. And because I've woven it in so carefully and for such a long distance, I actually cut my yarn quite closely. But some of you like to leave more of a tail and then trim them after blocking. So I'll show you one more time. I'm going to thread the yarn onto the darning needle. For this yarn, the yarn has come in this direction, so again I'm going to be working over the work in this direction. I'm splitting the yarn, just making sure that it's completely buried. There may be other ways of doing this, but this is how I've sort of worked out from watching various tutorials. It really doesn't matter exactly what direction you go, as long as you've really buried those threads, because you would hardly notice these threads running across with all the floats on the back of the work anyway. And because it's colour work, there's not so much stretch, so you're not so worried about duplicating the stitches on every time you weave the ends in. So I think that's nice and buried into the work now. I'm going to snip that off. And there we are. We've sewn all our ends in. Now I'm going to block mine. Some people like to sew their ends in after blocking, which is you can always do, but I quite like to sew them in before blocking. It's just completely up to you. So there we go. I hope you enjoy sewing in your ends of your colour work. See you next time. Bye.